Hello, Mark Red Larson here for the Dreamcatcher podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today, my guest is Dani Frank. How are you doing today, Dani?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing well. It is so exciting to be on your podcast with you and be in the opposite chair for once.
Yeah, because you have your own podcast. So, how long have you been doing your podcast?
I started my podcast in January of this year,
Okay.
2024. I had been working on it since probably November of 23, but I released my first episode in January and
Nice.
it's been up and running. I think episode 13 or 14 came out today, actually.
Awesome. So is podcasting like you thought it would be?
No, not at all. It's honestly, it's been challenging in some ways, like teaching myself how to edit. When I first decided I wanted to start a podcast, I said I will do this, but I will not edit an episode.
Uh-huh.
I was very afraid of the whole editing world and that kind of thing, but I taught myself how to edit and it's been quite a journey. I actually found I really enjoy editing, so that's been nice.
Awesome.
And something which you'll probably be able to relate with is all the people that I've met through doing my own episodes have
Uh-huh.
just been so nice, so
Yeah.
friendly. I feel like I
Yeah.
have a whole community of podcasters, something that I
I
never
agree.
expected.
Yep.
And I also thought that I was going to hit this point where I could not find somebody to share on my podcast, but that's been
Uh-huh.
the quite opposite. There's so many people who want to share their stories
Yes.
and I'm so grateful for that because there's so many stories to be told and ultimately
Yes.
I'd love to make people feel a little less alone in their own stories.
Amen. I would love that. So, yeah, that's kind of what I found too. It's really a group of people that want to do collaborate and help each other very, very much, which I love. So what is the name of your podcast?
My podcast is Illuminating You, and it's hosted by my business, the Society of Authentic Living. And basically, guests come on and they share their stories of overcoming a struggle, whether it be infertility, addiction, some sort of disability. I have just tons and tons of different stories from different people, different walks of life, and it's been really fun to hear their stories and hear how they're already impacting
Awesome.
people.
Very cool. So, what was the epiphany? What got you to wanting to do a podcast?
Yeah. So I've known for a long time that my passion was helping others from a young age. I really enjoyed volunteering. And then when I was in college, I joined a service sorority, which is
Nice.
similar to a typical sorority, but we just do a lot of community service.
Very
And
nice.
yeah. And then I went on to get my master's in social work, and I'm working as a substance abuse therapist. And I love my job. I feel very fulfilled in my job. I feel like I'm really right where I'm supposed to be. But I felt like I was impacting a couple people on a very great scale, really helping people change
Okay.
their lives, but only helping a couple people at a time. And
Right.
so there was one day where I was driving home from work and I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
about a client of mine in particular. And I was like, if she could get sober and share her story with the world, she could help so many people.
Yes. Yes.
And so it was really through that that I was like, how can I do this? How can I get people
Yeah.
like her to share her story? And podcasting came to mind. And so that's really where the podcast and the vision came from.
Yeah, and that's so awesome. I mean, that just and it will. That's kind of my, the backstory because everybody's got a backstory, and a lot of times I even my own backstory. It's just like no, but that's not going to resonate with anybody. That's not going to. But it's like in reality, it does more than you would ever think. So I mean, so where would you like to take this with the podcast? I mean, expand more on that, or
Yeah. So the short answer to that is I don't know. I feel
well,
like more will be revealed. Like I feel like this
yep,
is something that's a lot bigger than a podcast. That's part of why I started a business that's like hosting the podcast. I feel like this business, the Society of Authentic Living, is something bigger.
okay,
Something where people can really like live their authentic lives, be themselves. I've thought about leading retreats, like small ones and big ones. I've
nice.
thought about writing a memoir. I've thought about documentaries, like lots of different things.
Wow.
I just nothing feels like I feel like the idea of the memoir. Like I feel like my story for the memoir is not done yet. And so I
Hear
feel
you.
like I'm not supposed to start that right now. And I have started a little bit working on a documentary. I'm not sure if that's going to pan out, but I feel like these pieces will kind of fit together when the time is right. And like,
Yep.
I think right now I'm supposed to be kind of focused on the podcasting side of it and getting that off the ground before I dive into another area.
I hear you, and it'll show itself when it's time's right. It's supposed to be, and because sometimes you want to rush it. It's just like I want to do all this, and the more you get into, I believe, the more you get into this journey, the more you realize you just like now's the time. You just know, you have that feeling. So I didn't ask you. So where are you located at, Dani?
So I am a Georgia native. I grew up in Atlanta and I moved around to a couple different cities through undergrad and grad school. But then I recently moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and
Nice.
we're in the Western North Carolina area. And I mean, it's been lovely. It's like a dream living in the mountains. I look outside on my way
Oh,
home from work, and I'm like, wow, this is home. This is pretty cool.
that is pretty cool. When you can say that, that is so awesome. So I mean, with everything you do, with the substance, getting onto that area of your life. So, what do you do day in and day out on that?
Yeah. So day in and day out, I work at it's about a 30-day substance abuse treatment center. I lead
Okay.
groups. So I do substance
Wow.
abuse themed groups. I do individual sessions. I do group therapy, stuff like that. Really, I feel like part of my purpose is really educating people about the disease of addiction, especially my clients. I feel like the disease of addiction is something that is very misunderstood. I feel like there's not a
Okay.
lot of education about it. For example, when we talk about the disease of addiction, quote unquote, a lot of people kind of go back and forth with, is this thing really a disease? And so one of the things I teach my
Interesting.
clients, yeah, so one of the things I teach my clients is, what something, what quality something needs to have to be considered a disease and how addiction kind of falls into that model. Um,
Wow.
I just feel like there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of lack of education. So I really like to kind of teach my clients the scientific part of it, teach them the spiritual aspect of it, teach them, give them
Hmm.
foundational skills to help
Yes.
them live a long life clean and sober.
That is so awesome. And I mean, I never thought of addiction as a disease. I always thought it was somebody weak-willed, or somebody that it's just. But that puts a whole new view on it. I mean, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So, so if it's a disease, is there something that it actually can actually be taken care of? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's medication given to treat disease or to depression, but is there something that could prevent it?
So that's a really interesting question. So let me break down super quick what something has to have to be a disease. Basically, there has to
Okay.
be an organ that has a defect that then causes
Okay.
symptoms. So in the disease of diabetes, the organ that's affected is the pancreas. And the defect is that something is wrong with the insulin production, either too much or too little is being
Right.
produced.
Right.
And the symptoms are things like blindness, numbness, coma, those kinds of things. Now, when we talk about addiction, the organ that's affected is the midbrain. So the midbrain
Okay.
is the part of the brain that uh, tells you to breathe, tells you to eat, stuff like that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so the defect, what happens is the fancy name for the defect is hedonic dysregulation. Um, but
Wow.
but basically, the brain kind of gets tripped up, and it's experiencing these really big dopamine releases that it was never meant to experience. And so the brain
Okay.
is constantly seeking out these big dopamine releases. Or a kind of a different way to explain it is the brain thinks, because the survival part of the brain has been messed up or hijacked, which we constantly hear, it
Okay.
literally thinks that it needs alcohol and drugs to survive. So
Wow.
imagine you held your breath for 2 minutes. At
Right.
the end of 2 minutes, you're going to be like dying for a breath of air.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is often the same reaction that an alcoholic or an addict feels. They feel like they are literally going to die if they don't get a breath in, and
Wow.
it's really scary. And then a lot of the symptoms that we see are things like legal issues, mental health issues, homelessness, relational issues, a lot of, things that are very, visible to us.
Right.
That all stems in the midbrain, and that part of the brain that's been hijacked into thinking that we need drugs and alcohol to survive.
That is amazing. I mean, wow. It gives me a whole new perspective on that. I mean, wow. It gives me more compassion for anybody suffering from that too.
Yeah. And two, when I teach these things to my clients, I almost see like a weight lifted off their shoulder. A lot of them come in with a lot of shame and guilt. They think, how could
Right.
I do this to myself, my family, my loved ones? How could I wreck my life over, this seemingly useless bottle?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but when we educate them and we show them, ultimately, like, you didn't ask for this when you were in kindergarten and they asked you what you wanted to be when you grow up. You didn't say an addict or an alcoholic.
Right.
You
Right.
had dreams and desires too. And, your
Amen.
brain almost turned on you in a way.
Wow, that is amazing. So, wow, I keep saying wow, but that just is amazing. I've never heard this before. I mean, and talk about if taking care of that, then you can talk about catching their dreams if they don't have that. Huh, wow, I can't even imagine that weight on them. Talk about a catch-22. You can't win in that situation because you feel
Yeah.
bad about yourself, but it's something you really can't control. Wow. So, how are they proceeding with that? I mean, with coaching and everything you do, but is there other things that they can do too?
Yeah. So I feel like my first step with a client is always education, teaching them
Okay.
why they are the way they are, then moving into, really digging into their problems. I'm very solution focused. So give me a problem, like, let's find a way to fix this. Something else
Right.
that I've really found that's been crucial with clients is helping them find their purpose. It's
Okay.
really challenging to create a sustainable life when you don't feel like you have a reason to
Right.
continue going. And so really helping
Yeah.
them figure out like what is their purpose here, aligning with that purpose,
Wow.
finding a job that aligns with that purpose. For a lot of my clients, that's working in the substance use field themselves. That's super common,
I could see that. Yeah.
um yeah, it's like
Wow.
one assignment I often have clients do is to write a mission statement similar to a business. A
Okay.
business has a mission statement, to
Right.
serve the community in
Right.
that
Right.
way.
Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but to write their own personal mission statement so they have a reason behind what they're doing. And I've oftentimes found clients to be more successful when there's meaning behind their life and they really have a reason to wake up and be an active part of the community.
Wow. Bless you, Danny, for what you're doing there. You're making my day here. I mean, that's helping people in an area that I didn't even know was there. I mean, so how do people, if they have this problem, how do they get a hold of you? How do they find you to work with you?
Yeah, so I work at a 30-day treatment center called Asheville Recovery Center. It's in
Okay.
Asheville. You can look us up online, or if you find me on social media, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll get you connected with Asheville Recovery Center. There are also tons of great treatment centers in lots of different areas. There's both privately funded, publicly funded. There's
Okay.
truly so many treatment options out there. If you want treatment, there's definitely a way to find treatment.
Awesome. That's cool. So cool. So do you think more people are reaching out because I mean there's less stigma, maybe a little bit than or do you think it's still got a stigma not to reach out as much?
I think that's a really interesting question, and this is just my personal opinion.
Okay.
I think it's two things. I think there's less stigma around it. I think that, I mean, Mark, you probably know somebody personally who has struggled with addiction. I would say
Oh
that
yes.
everybody knows, whether it's a family member, a friend, a coworker. I mean, there are so many people who struggled with it before.
Very
As
much.
somebody who struggled with it myself, I frequently have people reach out to me and say, I'm struggling with an addiction, or my sister's struggling with addiction, or my cousin, and
Okay.
how do I go about this? So I think that that's the first thing, is that so many people know somebody who have struggled with this
Right.
before, and so there's less stigma because of
Yes.
that. And then I think the other thing too is I think the drugs are getting harder. I think, and by that I mean I think the drugs are getting more dangerous. The, I, the fet
Ah,
the
okay.
fentanyl. I mean, the fentanyl
Right.
problem is
Yeah.
out of control.
It is.
Even a simple drug like marijuana. I always say the marijuana that's smoked today is not the marijuana that was grown in Uncle Johnny's backyard in the 80s. It is
Okay.
it is grown with significantly higher levels of THC. They say that
Really?
they say that it's 6 times more potent than it was in the 80s.
Wow.
And so, with that being said, there's more risks that come with that. So, they're actually seeing psychosis happen in people who are only smoking marijuana, which is
Wow.
extremely scary. I mean, the
It
seemingly
is.
harmless herb
Yeah.
is
Right.
causing people to go into psychosis and wind up in mental hospitals. And so I just think that, the drug scene is kind of changing in its own ways. There's new drugs coming out.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the drug xylazine before?
I don't think I have.
So it's literally it's horse tranquilizer, and
Okay.
they're finding it in a lot of drugs. But the scary thing about it is that it's not an opioid, and so
Okay.
Narcan, like the drug reversal
Oh,
that we commonly
sure.
hear
Right.
of, a
Right.
Narcan doesn't work for it. It's not an opioid.
Oh,
And so
wow.
people are having xylazine overdoses, and they're not able to. The only thing to help that is CPR, not
Oh my word. Oh my
mhm,
gosh.
yeah, not Narcan. And so it just, it's kind of scary what's happening out there,
Very
and
much.
addiction does not discriminate between
No, it doesn't.
gender, races, socioeconomic status, any of that.
No, and gosh, I mean that's scary. That is so scary with that. I had not heard of that, and oh my word, CPR is a uh, wow. I'm glad we're putting this out there to let people know that that is, and like you were talking with marijuana, people think it's harmless. It's like and in Nebraska, we don't even have medical marijuana legalized here. You can tell we're very conservative. I don't know how it is in North Carolina, but people still, it's like it's no big deal, and it's like if it's got 6 times more, that is scary too. So,
hmm
wow. I mean, wow, this is so good. It's so good, but it's so sad on so many levels there, just with all that stuff that's out there.
Well, I think
And
it's just I think it's important to educate ourselves about,
yes,
what we're really putting in our bodies when we think about especially in states where marijuana is not legal, thinking about
hmm,
how many hands that plant touched before it went to you. I mean,
true,
you have no idea what you're putting in your body. I mean, literally no idea. And so I think it's really important to educate ourselves and be really cognizant of, like, do I really want to
very
put this in
much.
my body? Do I not? It's really
Yeah,
scary to think about.
it is very scary. So, do you have an age group that's kind of the main group that you deal with?
So the youngest clients that we see are 18, and I've had clients as old as 75, 80 even. Really the
Wow.
age, I mean, it really is a broad spectrum of ages. Um
Okay.
I've worked in a previous treatment center before where we saw adolescents. And
Oh my
I think
word.
that's kind of, especially these days in high school, is a big thing. And I think it's
Yeah,
important to educate our high schoolers
I think
about
so too.
these things. Also, the kind of like predetermining risk factors. If you're gonna be an addict or an alcoholic, there's a lot of
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
genetics plays a big part of it. If you
exactly. Yeah,
so really educating high schoolers about these things so they can make an informed decision if they want to really go down this route or not.
very. So, male or female more?
I would say more male than
I
female,
would
and
have
that's
guessed that.
kind of been across
Okay.
the board of what I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, so do you speak in front of people, groups about what you do too?
So it's interesting you say that. That's something that I am really interested in. I actually reached out to a nonprofit about getting in touch with them to start giving presentations about this. My sorority that I mentioned, they host a convention every 2 years, and I was selected to be a presenter. That's in July, so I'm going to be giving
Okay.
my first ever addiction presentation, and I'm really excited to just educate people
Uh,
more,
yes.
about stuff that we talked about today.
Very good. That is so and so important. And if you, what is this sorority? I mean, if you, I would love to have you mention that.
Yeah.
If it, so what? I mean, it sounds like they do great things. What sorority is that?
Yes. So it is Omega Phi Alpha. They have,
Okay.
I wish I knew off the top of my head, believe they have around 15 chapters across the United States. And
Okay.
they're a service sorority. So it's similar to a regular sorority. They have things like Big Little, they have things like recruitment. You have to like
Sure. Okay.
join the sorority.
Okay.
But a big difference is there's like a lot less like partying and stuff. It's really like community service based, so you'll do
I like that.
service for the university, you'll do service for the local community, service
Very
for
nice.
international, um an international base, lots of different service. So really the basis of it is getting together, a group of people getting together to do different forms of community service.
So awesome. That is so
Yeah.
great. And that
Yeah.
is, I mean, I think sororities and especially fraternities have a bad rap, and I was
Yeah.
in a fraternity and it was actually a fraternity that was not like that.
Mhm.
It was not like your traditional. It was very
Yeah.
much we didn't do the traditional, the bad week, and then we did help week where we helped, and we did similar things. And it's just like don't believe everything because there are definitely fraternities out there that are that way, but
Mhm.
the one I wasn't, it was a great group of guys. In fact, I'm still in touch with a lot of them. And but I think we judge. I think probably with what the people you're dealing with get judged before people know them too. And I think in
Mhm.
society we judge so many things before. And so 5 years from now, where would you like to be?
Ooh, 5 years from now. Let's see. That's a challenging question. I think I will still in 5 years, I think I will still be working in the substance abuse field. I've thought about branching off and doing more private practice work as a therapist, but I
Okay.
think in 5 years I'll still be in the substance use field. Um I will have, let's see, I'll have about maybe 150 podcast episodes released at
Awesome.
that point. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes, I will be hopefully married with a house and
Okay.
a lot of animals, a couple dogs, a couple of cats, maybe some goats or chickens. We'll have to see.
I love that. That's a very nice. That sounds great. I can tell you've thought of
Yeah.
it. Okay, now we're going to
Yes.
go the other way. I always ask in the Dreamcatcher podcast, what were your dreams growing up as a child?
That's a really good question. My dreams growing up as a child were to help people. I think in a little bit of a different aspect. I think to help people more as a teacher. I
Hmm.
was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in 5th grade, and
Okay.
I had several phenomenal teachers. I was independently tutored for several years to kind of get back on track with my reading level. And
Okay.
I just often think about my teachers who helped me tremendously. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
definitely not in a place where I'm like, behind in any means now, but I was
Hmm.
definitely behind before and really struggled to keep up with my classmates. And it was through the help of my teachers. I mean, truly, truly made a difference in my life today so that I'm able to do the work that I
That's
do now. And
very
so I
cool.
remember, growing up with my younger sister, and we'd be playing I'd be the teacher and she'd
Right.
be
Right.
listening to the math lesson.
Uh huh.
But we really had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah. I mean, that is so. Who discovered that you were dyslexic? Dyslexic.
Yes.
But
So my parents did. It was my
they did.
first
Okay.
day of 5th grade, and we
Okay.
got our homework for our first day,
Uh huh.
and I sat down at the kitchen table. And that's how I remember it. Maybe it wasn't the kitchen table, but I sat down
Sure.
And I literally could not read the homework, and my mom was like,
Wow.
read that out loud." And I literally could not read the directions on the paper.
Wow.
And so my parents got me tested for dyslexia, and then, we got a dyslexic diagnosis, and I had hit it really well. I knew that I couldn't read. I knew that I was definitely not up
Wow.
to speed as my classmates. But I was pretty, I guess, embarrassed about it. Um,
Well, I can
yeah.
understand that too. And that was another thing that had more stigma to it too.
Mhm.
It was, gosh, and I made you got to fifth grade. That you really did well on that
I
because
hit it very well.
that had to be so tough.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and going back, you said you dealt with struggling on substance abuse or whatever.
Yeah.
So, if was that be something you'd want to talk about then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I always say, like, I was the most miserable uh a teenager. I was okay, like, elementary school I was okay, but then going
Okay.
into, like, middle school, high school was, like, really challenging for me. I went to a private Catholic high school, and they
Mhm.
were very focused on their athletics, and if you weren't a cheerleader or a cross country member or on the football
Right.
team, you were, like, not cool at all. And I was
Mhm.
in the marching band. I was in color guard,
Okay. Okay.
and just I don't know if bullied was the right word, but I just did not have a lot of friends. And
Okay.
so really, really struggled through that. Um,
Hmm.
I had an eating disorder through high school. I
Wow.
self-harmed, just
Huh.
very, very depressed. And then I got to college and I found substances, both alcohol and drugs. And
Wow.
I remember I was high one night and I was like, I have found peace. I was finally content. Which
Wow.
is, looking back is really sad. Um, but that was my truth at that time. I had found
Yep.
something that brought me joy, brought me happiness. I didn't feel depressed anymore. I felt comfortable in my own skin. I could
Hmm.
socialize and feel like
Hmm.
I fit in.
Yep.
Um, and then was kind of thrown into recovery. My friends contacted my parents when I was a senior in college and told them that I was out of control with my using and drinking and that I needed help. And
Wow.
I was really mad. My
I
parents sent me
bet.
to treatment, and my plan was to stay sober for 3 months so that I could complete the program and kind of get everyone off my back. But my plan was always to go back to drinking and using.
Really.
I don't think
Wow.
I was ready to get sober. Uh, Being sober sounded really boring to me. I was 22 and having a great time in college, partying and all
Yep.
that stuff.
Right. Right.
And I started working with a sponsor in AA, and
Hmm.
which was required of me through the program, the
Oh,
treatment
I bet.
program I was
Okay.
in. I was only doing what
Okay.
was required of me to complete
Right.
this
Right.
program.
Yes. Yep.
And I remember calling her one day and I was like, I feel really happy right now. This is kind of weird. And
Uh
she was
huh.
like, no, 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 that's good. You're supposed to be feeling happy. And I mean,
Uh huh.
basically, one day I went from this depressed teenager, to somebody who was happy. And I ultimately didn't want to give that up. And so that I was 22, and that was about 4.5 years ago. And now I work in the substance use field.
I mean, talk about and well backstory, and then you can relate, and that really, I mean, that's got to be that. I mean, we go with everything we're supposed to have to go through, but I'm sorry you had to go through that. But it makes you able to relate to these people maybe even better, probably a lot
Yeah.
better, I would guess. So, and you
Yeah.
had such good friends. You had true friends. They called your parents. Wow. I
Hmm.
mean, that is probably didn't seem like that at the time, but
Not at the time, but
yeah.
very, very grateful for the way that things happened. I feel like, it was divine timing. I was really
Yep.
struggling to manage things on my own at that point, and I got help before it got extremely out of control, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever thought about, I mean, writing a book or doing like a TED talk or talking like that, being just a public speaker? I mean,
Yeah.
gosh, your backstories are awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, it's awesome because some people can relate. So,
Yeah. No, I really have thought about it. I've thought about kind of looking into the TED Talk world.
okay.
Definitely. I think a memoir, publishing
Yeah.
a
I think
memoir is definitely in
yes.
the line of things. I just feel like I don't know, like I feel like I haven't gotten married, I haven't had kids. Like I feel like there's just so much more to my story that has not happened
Yep.
yet. So I feel like
Yep.
publishing a memoir would be like kind of premature right now.
Okay.
I thought about kind of getting started on it. Some chapters are definitely written and finished, which is
True.
exciting.
Yes. Yes.
Um yeah, but I've really thought about educating more people about addiction through my
Yes.
story and that kind of thing.
Yes, so important. That'd be so important. Well, memoir part one. So, something like
Yes.
that. No, I mean, gosh, I mean, you've been so many different things. So we talked about that you like traveling the other day when we were talking. So, uh,
Yes.
is there um, is there any some way you could put the two together? I mean, traveling and helping
You
people.
know, I have thought about that. I actually came across a podcaster today who travels and records all her podcast episodes with her guests in person, and I was like,
Oh,
"Whoa!"
wow,
I was like, "That is really cool."
that
But
is
I have thought about traveling, doing speaking engagements in person. I just feel like it hasn't kind of like fallen into place yet, and I'm very big on
right.
like letting things like be in the
Me
right
too.
timing and not like pressing it into place. Like I definitely feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be right now. I feel like I'm
Yep.
still, early in the addiction world. Really kind of want to play that through, and then, I
Right.
feel like what's next will fall into place at the right time.
It will. So maybe a podcast down the line we can do one in Nebraska here. You can come visit me in Nebraska.
Yes, I have so many people across the world that I want to come see. I mean, I have met people in several different countries, tons of
Uh-huh.
different states. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely when I'm in Nebraska, I don't think I've ever been to Nebraska before, but when I
Well,
go to Nebraska for this, I we have to see each other in person.
that sounds good. Probably not a big demand to come to Nebraska. I mean, it's just like that's not on people's top of their, when we have our thing a few years ago, our thing for the state was nice. And the people are nice, but people I found pretty much everywhere are nice. But it's like, really, you couldn't come up with more than that for the state of Nebraska. So,
Nice. I love that.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know, but that's something I found on podcasting. Been invited to so many places around the world. I mean, it's just it's amazing. Like we talked earlier, the collaboration, and I think we all have the same heart, wanting to help people. I think the majority of
Yes.
the people I have, and I think that is what it's all about. I think that very
Yeah.
much is. So,
Yeah.
so Danny, before we end the podcast, anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
Anything else that I would like to share? Um, I'd like to share a little bit about why I started my podcast. I don't think
Okay,
I,
very good.
dove into that at all.
Okay.
So I think that it is so important for people to realize that they are not alone. I feel like so many people go through life thinking they are the only person facing whatever they are going through.
Yep.
And what I found, especially through working in the addiction field and my own depression and things like that, I found that there's so many other people who have gone through the same struggles that we've gone through. And I think it's
Yes.
important to find those people, really find those people that have gone through it before
Yep.
you, figure out how they got through it, really pick their brain if you're struggling, ask them, what are their suggestions for coping skills and things like that. But I
Yes.
think it's just really important to, find your community of people. And I really hope to create some sort of, community within my business, the Society of Authentic Living,
Hmm.
um, and really just, connect people.
I think that is so awesome. I mean, that is, and yeah, your vibe kind of attracts your tribe. And
Hmm.
so when you started your podcast, the because I have people ask that they think it's so hard. Did you have a lot of difficulty starting one from that side?
Yeah, so I had a friend who had started a podcast,
Uh
and
huh.
I was like, if she could do it, I can do it. That was
Okay.
kind of what I was telling myself,
Uh
and
huh.
I had her sit down with me and show me how she did it. Um and I wound up kind of going a different route than her, but it was nice to see, kind of like one method for it. But even something
Yes.
as simple as like buying a microphone, like
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about buying a microphone.
I hear you.
I didn't even know how to like I didn't even know where to record a podcast episode. I had to do kind of a lot of research on the back end of it,
Hmm. Hmm.
but and also with that being said, like the first 3 episodes I recorded and edited took so long. Like, I think my first episode took
I
8
can relate.
hours to edit. Like, it was
I
really,
can.
really challenging.
Oh, yes,
Um,
it is. Yes.
but I mean, things have gotten a lot more smooth, seamless. Now it takes me maybe an hour to record an episode, throw an intro, throw an outro. I think a lot of people, when they think about podcasting, are really, really doing a lot of different things. They are more like short-sighted with it. They think about, the first 5 episodes, but I think really
Yep.
like figuring out how to like make something sustainable so you can stick with it for the
Yes.
long run. Like, even myself, I really wanted to release an episode every week, and then I
Yep.
realized like that was not realistic with my schedule, so I decided to do it every other week, and it's been a lot more
Yep.
manageable. I don't want it to
Yep.
be something that's super stress inducing.
Yes.
But I think really trying to stick with some sort of schedule is really important.
I think so too. And you have to do with it because you don't want to get so overwhelmed or whatever that you quit.
Yeah.
And you definitely, and with you working everything you're doing, I could see every other week would probably still be quite a bit. So, but no, it's interesting. And podcasting, that's why I love it because it's so, you can almost do anything. You can do like a pop-up podcast, or it's so free. It just doesn't have to
Yeah.
be this way, and that's what I love about it. And I have still yet to do one live. I've recording, no problem. Live,
Yes.
live is one I have to master yet. Thought I did for the 175th episode, and I did not. I thought it was going to be live on YouTube and Facebook, and did not. But
Oh
um,
man.
at least it was recorded, and it's kind of like anybody thinking about starting anything. It's a process. It's a journey.
Yeah.
People want to know, and I was the same way. You want to know it all right away, and you look back, and it is a journey. And the stuff that you struggle with, like you said, and I can relate with that, was overwhelmed and intimidated, and it gets to the point it becomes second nature. So you just want to start. So
Yeah.
so before we end, is there anything else you would besides podcasting? Anything else that you're looking at doing with your life? I mean,
Hmm. Honestly, I feel like we really covered a lot today, and
okay,
it's been really fun to be on the opposite side of the seat.
I
I've
see
kind
that.
of I've been trying to, find more podcasts to be on and kind of like
Hmm.
dive in, get my feet wet in that area. And it's been lovely to spend some time with you. And you're a really
Thank you.
great host.
Thank you. For somebody who I could relate with your story. I was kind of that way in high school and stuff. In fact, I didn't talk, and actually won an award for being quiet. Um,
Wow.
for somebody, I found my voice, and in podcasting, when I was told over 3 years ago that I should do it, I thought, no way. And now
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite. It is my favorite thing to do. I look forward to doing this because I get to talk to awesome people like you that are helping people around the world, and you're helping, and I can't wait to see what you're doing in the next 5 to 10 years. Let alone everything. I mean, you have a heart of. You just have a caring heart, and I love that.
Thank you, Mark.
But on that, I think we'll end it there. Thank you for being my guest. I look forward to either another podcast or seeing you in Nebraska and a podcast.
Yes,
So,
both live podcasts in
yeah, there you
Nebraska.
go. Yeah. So we'll see. Yeah, it can't be hard. It's just I have not figured the right combination out yet. So, but on that, thank you, Dani, for being the guest today on the Dreamcatcher podcast, and I look forward to talking to you in the future. And take care.
Thank you, Mark.